You're going to start the recording again, Sophie? Okay. Just continuing again regarding Derek Jensen's little video. Does anyone know the title of that? I don't think I've got that written down. I just should mention it during the talk for people to refer to. But yeah, what I was saying was the separation of the
Was it recently
generations.
posted, Gary? Was it recently posted on Reddit?
Yes, on Reddit, I'm fairly
I think
sure.
I'll find it.
Short talk by Derek. Oh dear, oh dear. Yeah, I don't think I've got it here.
I've got it. I'll link it in there.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I just like to mention it in the audio, so if anyone's listening, they don't have to follow it up. It's easy to get it.
Yeah, I posted it as a reply to one of your comments in the Russell brand, but I put the link in the comment thing in the Jitsi chat for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, no, he had me thinking about other ways in which, because Sophie was talking about the lack of initiation processes, but that's also very much connected with the absence of older people guiding younger generation. You know, the generations are separated by the processes of the society we live in. Young people are in schools or educational institutions, and other people are in their work environments, and in any event, extended family systems aren't living in the one place. They're geographically separated, and so you don't get the handing down of any generational wisdom or teaching, even going back to what Sophie said earlier about the breastfeeding that example being in a traditional kind of household all the time, but not anymore. And so, we've kind of got these pigeonholed generations who are the vacuum of information is being filled by institutions rather than people that or are related to. So it's this sort of impersonal and institutional takeover of the transfer of wisdom. The trouble is, there's not much wisdom coming with it.
With breast milk, you also transmit immunity, from the woman's antibodies and everything that she has encountered in her life. She's transmitting it to the baby. So there is, of course, we know that babies died a lot more of infectious disease a long time ago. But people are debating whether it's because of poverty and poor nutrition that their exposure to any type of infection would kill them, more than the fact that they were not vaccinated. Because Illich in his book Medical Nemesis does an extended analysis of the so-called progress of medicines in terms of infectious disease and epidemics. And the figures are startling. I'm not going to go into it in this meeting. If you want to look at the book, it's startling to see that really the story of polio, tuberculosis, and all sorts of other diseases has been grossly manipulated by the medical world. And in fact, when he visits the statistics, the numbers, and the stories, the narrative is totally destroyed. So I'm not a conspiracist. How can you not be a conspiracist when you've been in this group for a while? But what I mean is that when I sometimes when I'm really angry, I think, well, it goes together, this suppression of breast milk and with huge campaigns of massive immunizations and vaccinations of baby in time. It's just the same kind of timeline. When the decline of breastfeeding happened, that's when the uptake of vaccinations in the world for babies started. But what do we know in the long term is going to happen with this? I'm not advocating to not vaccinate your child. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, it's like everything has to be taken in a huge systemic view and context. And the figures can be manipulated to suit the companies, like we've seen in a recent story starting with C. You can make the figures do anything and particularly frighten people. I don't know if the massive immunization campaigns that have been done in Africa, India, and South America by the various charities have improved or not the life of the people. I'm very, very doubtful, and I hate to say that because I used to think when I was young, oh, I'm going to be a doctor going to look after the poor people. I've been through this kind of mentality. We're going to bring all our wonderful Western medicine, and we're going to save all these poor people. And when I started to look deeper and deeper into it, I completely changed my outlook, and I'm still asking myself questions at my age. I really don't know.
Well, I think that's one of those situations where reducing intermediaries between people and their necessities is a good idea. So, like with the breastfeeding situation, especially, so it seems that the baby formula is mostly an unnecessary intermediary that causes harm in the long term. I can't say for sure. I'm just speculating because I'm not a woman and I don't know too much about children, but that's what it seems to me. And that just in general, if there's intermediaries between you and necessities that you can get rid of, I think it's just wise to just do it.
And for the woman, it's highly beneficial for her health to do so because it reduces a lot of problems that can happen after you have a baby if you don't breastfeed, in terms of getting the womb back to its right size, getting your hormones back in sync, getting um, your tiredness, healing, the tone of the body, because breastfeeding activates all sorts of natural processes in the body that bring back the energy after the tiredness of pregnancy. There's all sorts of things that are beneficial. Nearly everything is good because it's natural. We don't need to stay or compare, like some doctors and midwives are doing with the patients, telling them the downsides of breastfeeding and the good sides of breast bottle. This is completely perverted language, perverted conversation. There is nothing to condemn in breastfeeding, but there has been situations where it can't happen. That's something that's always been addressed in history. To come back also to the immunity deficit when children are fed formula, it also fits an agenda, doesn't it, to think that, well, a long time ago there wasn't many intermediaries, like you say, and people were living in small communities, so they were not exposed to a lot of infections. And if they did, well, one tribe would be wiped out, but the other ones would, because they wouldn't be traveling that far to propagate it, and that was it. But with it all ties into our new industrialized civilization, the need to immunize all these people who are living far away, who are prospective travelers, people who are going to be maybe future slaves, who are going to be traveling, who are going to be used in the machine. So you are preparing and priming entire populations with immunizations so that they can start invading airports and buses and trains and be part of the horror machine. I see that as a whole thing. Massive immunizations, massive stop of breastfeeding, massive healthcare deficits, and all the excesses that we are seeing at the moment, the excess of prescriptions of antibiotics, the excess of everything is to be analyzed through that view of the machine.
Yeah, the natural was always best. That's my position anyway. And to return to the clock, I was on a midsummer mountain trip like 7, 8 years ago, and it was a kind of slow spring, slow summer, or lots of snow still in the mountains. And I had this epiphany in a way, because I was waiting for for the snow to melt, or for it to decide to go further up in the mountains. So I was basically sitting there in a snow-covered landscape, where the snow used to go away earlier, and I heard what do you call that in English? The cuckoo bird, right? And there's lots of Norwegian songs about the cuckoo bird, of course, like in any culture. So basically, what happens if when you get a 3 or 4 weeks later removal of the snow, melting of the snow in mountains, then every animal or bird that is dependent on the blueberry bushes and all of the other plants that come up as soon as the snow is gone is put on hold. All of their activities are put on hold, and they have to mate later, and they have to start feeding later, and all those things. So obviously the what is use term for this other time, the Kairos time. Yeah, so basically all the other beings on this planet are on the Kairos time. It's like when it's gone, and then we can start our spring season. And before that happens, everybody, if you're a mammal or a bird, you have to just find other things to do, while waiting for the snow to go away, or for this other climate thing to come into place. So yeah, so absolutely, they are much. These other species are much more prepared, I think, than us as human beings, or as civilized human beings anyway, for a delay, or for a slight deviation from the norm. And then that's also why I think most of the still living species today will also be more resilient when our community collapses, when the human society collapses, because they're not dependent on this field of corn or whatever, to get the right temperature and precipitation at the right time. Like we are sort of very, very fine-tuned to the stable climate over the past 10,000 years, I think. Whilst the birds and the animals are not, they can always do plan B or plan C, but humans, we only have plan A. It's the only plan we got, right? And then I just wanted to say something about school, because you mentioned school earlier when I was out. And for the past week, I've been watching a lot of professional and amateur videos about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, because of our special on Wednesday. No, on last Sunday, was it? Yeah. So the thing is that I was also a natural wonder when it came to mathematics. I had no idea I had any skills in mathematics before I came to the first week or the first month of the first class in school. But then I just excelled totally, and it was just so easy for me. So I cannot even be proud because I and claim that I put a big effort into it, because I didn't. It was just in me. I was just born with it, basically. And I also saw on the net in the past week that I'm the same personality type, the Jungian personality type. Jung was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. So he was another psychologist I think in Austria as well as Sigmund Freud. And so he basically divided humanity into 16 different personality types. And of course, of those 16, I'm in the least common one. I'm in the most abnormal category, and it's the same category as Ted Kaczynski, as it happens. And then I also had a phone call with my mother about milk, because I had some kind of allergic reaction to cow milk. After the breastfeeding, I had to go to the hospital because of some cow milk allergic reaction, and my mom's retelling of the story of the isolation in hospital was kind of reminiscent of what Ted's mom said about him, because he got a case of he got some kind of rash on his body, and so he had to be isolated at a very young age from his family in hospital. But I don't really think that was important to his personality, or what happened to Ted Kaczynski later, with the killing spree and stuff. I think that's just something that mothers are very, very worried about when you're like a toddler, or when you're like 1 or 2 years old, right? But the thing is, I was also into mathematics, and I totally excelled in it. I got the best grades all the way up to gymnasium in Europe. But then the good thing that happened to me that didn't happen to Ted was that I discovered girlfriends, and romanticism and stuff, and so that totally transformed me, because I very soon realized that you couldn't use mathematics to understand women. That was totally the opposite of what you needed in order to understand women. So I turned from mathematics to philosophy, basically, philosophy and literature and stuff. So because mathematics is fun for the thing that it can do, but if you're any kind of a normal person, you will very soon discover that it cannot solve every problem on the planet, right? For instance, the very near to hand problem of how to live with a girlfriend, right? I think that was sort of my epiphany in gymnasium or high school in American, that it's like totally useless when it comes to understanding other human beings.
I'm just reminded of something humorous that Sophie was telling me about shooting lessons. And you remember I sent the little video of that song that you can't get a man with a gun. And I'm just thinking of Tolstoy finding out that you can't get a girl with algebra. That's sort of a song for that
No. Maybe if you make a beautiful equation.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh gosh. Yeah.
What were
So
you saying? What you were saying going south earlier in the talk about the cuckoo and coming back and the melting of the snow um, brings on a very big synchronicity because the cuckoo has returned since April, but at the moment he's very active around my place and I can hear him all day and evening. He just go cuckoo, cuckoo constantly. But anyway, made me think that you talk about the resilience of animals as opposed to humans. Yeah, but look at the fact also that those animals, those birds, for example, the cuckoo, are migratory, so they're nomads, and they live their winter in Africa, and they come north in our European summer, as far north as your parts in Norway. Uh, they are, in terms of change of climate or global upheaval of weather, these birds are equipped to different environments. They experience their winter in a very quite a hot continent in Africa, even though it's not, and they come to our summer that can be quite warm here. They're like, if you transpose that to humans, again, we go back to the fact that nomadic people will be much more resilient than sedentary, whether they're indigenous or not. Because if you take a tribe of some people in Africa, if there is an ice age, or if they can't get their food in the forest anymore, they're fucked. I mean, they're just not nomads. They don't know how to adjust to different things.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I never thought about that actually, because for the birds, and I've been recently thinking that I would have liked to see a David Attenborough movie about how the birds started, going north and south and stuff. But the interesting thing for our time is like, yeah, absolutely. If they can live in Africa, totally they can overwinter in Greenland. If it gets warmer here, so they can totally deal with higher temperatures, because at some point, I think if the globe is going to keep on warming, which everything looks like it's going to, then at some point that pattern will stop. The birds will no longer go south, right? And I know I'm called going south. So, but anyway, but the birds won't necessarily go south if it becomes like 10 degrees warmer in Greenland and in the Nordic countries. So that's obviously one of the resilient points. And
yeah, but the cuckoo needs a kind of a cooler place than the deadly heat of the African summer to nest. Well, nest. That's a steel nest.
Yeah, they steal their nest.
Yeah, they're
they?
pirates. They're totally
Yeah.
nomadic pirates. They fly all the way from Africa and steal the nests that poor little birds around here have taken weeks to build, and they just take it and just throw it.
And that's one of the big problems for a rapidly changing world, because, as you say, with the cuckoo bird, a lot of species are dependent on other species, right? So if the cuckoo bird has, it's sort of plan A for 10,000 years has been to just steal the nest of another bird. But if that other bird or those other bird species go away, then the cuckoo bird will maybe have to actually have their own nest, right? Or so a lot of species are actually dependent on other species for their daily life.
So nomads are depending on sedentary people, well, sedentary creatures. For certain nomads. Certain nomads are like the cuckoo, for example. But I suppose in humanity we might have examples if we looked. But yeah, the nomadic depends on the sedentary. Everything is connected.
Yeah, and the project that I mentioned to you, Sophie, earlier about the sort of collapse decision tree is about to whom is the societal collapse a problem. And when I say whom, I use Derek Jensen's term where he talks about some people are animals, some people are plants, you know. Yeah. So basically all other species as well as us, because we are only one little species, even though we're 99% of the problem on the planet, we are only one in 10 million species or something, right? So a lot of the United Nations, what do you call them? Their goals or their collapse indicators or whatever, a lot of those goals or their problems, ecological problems, they will stop short, they will stop abruptly when our society collapses. You know, so it's like the plastic pollution, the industrial pollution, the toxic pollution from agriculture and stuff, all of those things will stop abruptly when we go away, or not we as humans, but when our society stops functioning, right? So for 99.9% of the species on this planet, the industrial collapse will be a super happy day, right? And that's important. I think it's important to this discussion to be aware that our demise or our going away as Homo colossus, as some people call it. I call it global Homo, but that often gets deleted by Twitter and YouTube, so I cannot say global Homo, but let's say Homo colossus, the industrial man. When we go away, all the other animals and plants will have a huge party in the forest, I think.
Yeah, in relation to the talking about like how the cuckoo depends on other species, that reminds me of the fractal theory of evolution, where Hugh was talking about filter feedback loops and parasitic filter feedback loops. So like predatory hunting animals like lions are like a parasitic filter feedback loop on like zebras and impalas and stuff, or whatever gazelle type ungulates live near lions. I don't know exactly. And then wolves are like a parasitic filter feedback loop of like elk and deer and stuff. And then the elk and deer are parasitic filter feedback of like grass and bushes and certain, trees. Yeah, so all that stuff is connected. Um, yeah, it's like all eddies in a stream, all connected together. Yeah, and it's interesting to talk about this stuff with like normies. Like when you say like, yeah, when this system implodes, it's gonna be great for the animals. I'll clap to you. It's like, well, aren't you part of the system? It's like, yeah, but I'm not rooting for it to win. I'm rooting for it to fall on its face. I'm like, but you'll die. It's like, who gives a shit? Yeah, it sounds like like to them it sounds completely evil, but it's like it's just the identification problem, like identifying with their station and the myth of the system and its leaders and all that. It's like, yeah, of course this looks like death and despair, and I have empathy for that kind of suffering, but I feel like in a lot of ways the denial is voluntary. Like, the information is there, they can learn at any time and shift their allegiance. So, but I still empathize with the pain of it. It's not easy.
Um, yeah, I just thinking while you were saying that that there's a problem with language too involved with that kind of thinking of the normies that you were just talking about. Is that um, and a little bit connected too with the comment of Jensen's about some people are plants or animals. Is that when we say we, uh, the tendency is to assume that just refers to human beings, as though we somehow live in splendid isolation on the planet, completely insulated from any kind of deeper biological integration with everything else that's here. And I think there's a parallel too with the spiritual error of when we use the word I in language or me, where we assume when you say I, you people, the overuse of an identification with the word I leads people to think that they are a separate individual personality, an isolated creature. And so, yeah, I guess the point I'm making is that language leads us into this trap of not connecting with who we really are as beings ourselves, and then also not connecting with all the other beings and the biosphere that we live in either. You know, the words I and we have caused a lot of a lot of people, I guess, to just be completely blind to who they are themselves and to what the planet is that they're living on. And if you don't, I just think that there's an advantage to be had in questioning language because it leads us to make certain assumptions which aren't correct.
I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the biggest problems that most people are facing now, not to mention the normies, is that they, you know, as different from me, who has been thinking about these collapse things for like many decades. The normies were just hearing about it today. You know, like in this latest UN report, it talks about total societal collapse by 2050 or something, which of course is way too late for the real collapse. But anyway, it's the first time the UN talks about a total societal collapse, and that report came out this May. So back to the language thing is that their big problem is that they like everybody, most everybody I've met in my life to this day, think only about humans inhabiting this planet, right? So my point to the contrary is that the huge majority of people on this planet, and I'm using the Derek definition of people, right? The plants and animals and everything. The huge majority of people on this planet will actually see it as a positive when our human civilization collapses, because that means the end of the encroachment of human spaces, industrial areas and living areas for humans, and the poison, you know, the poison stream from factories and fields and stuff. All of that stops, and also humans will decrease in numbers, and in isolation that is a terrible thing, you know, if you put on your human face. I'm sorry for laughing, but yeah, I'm just trying to explain it. So it's a terrible catastrophe for us as a species, but the huge majority who has been under our heels for thousands and thousands of years, for them it's a positive. And I'm not kind of I'm not suggesting it will be a vote where a plant and an animal will have a vote, but in their minds anyway, and in their experience for the first 200 years after our collapse, they will be all for it, and that's my assumption.
Yes, two things here. I was thinking about the human exclusion zones that we already have, and the notable ones that people tend to mention are the no man's land between North and South Korea, where apparently the wildlife is amazingly, um, uh, it's just remarkable area of regeneration of the natural environment. Um, and even in the areas around Chernobyl, even though there's toxicity there, enormous return of wildlife there as well, simply because most of the people um, are being kept out. But I think, there's a question which is, uh, I mean, I know Hugh spoke about this terrible uh, blight of the alien cortex. But I wonder, should we feel bad about this in the sense that uh, was it more or less inevitable that human beings would end up doing this, coming to this extremity? Um, you know, um, would it if you reran the experiment, would it probably still do more or less the same thing to the planet? Um,
Well,
and
I
I
Yeah,
I
and
think
I
it.
suppose this, I just finished the question, which is that, and also the question is, should we be on a guilt trip about it? Um, uh, and if anyway, I'll go on. I'll let you talk.
I don't think we
Yeah,
should be on a guilt trip. I think, as as we discussed last Sunday when you were not here, Gary, we were discussing when humans went over the line or something. When we sort of passed our tipping point. Uh, so that was, yeah, it's like either it was 300 years ago or 10,000 years ago, like with the agriculture or the industrial revolution. So I think to your question, we would have come to this point eventually anyway at some point. And as Guy McPherson and a lot of other people say, we living now are kind of happy to be able to witness this. It's just in isolation. It's kind of, why would you kill yourself now? It's sort of the it's the final big finale of human civilization. So totally, I'm not gonna pull the trigger now because yeah. So that's sort of I think for us living now, it's like, why wouldn't you want to witness this? It's like, it's the last episode of Twin Peaks or whatever, right? Uh, but back to your more serious question about guilt trip. It's I don't think it's not up to us. We don't have any agency as individuals or as a species anymore. So so it's not our guilt the way I see it. And also going back to what I was said earlier, I think our going away, or our civilization going away, is a positive, for all the other people on the planet. Um, so therefore, because you have the duration element of our going off the charts with the population and heating and everything, it's how long it lasts, which is one of the most important aspects of our ecological footprint. So the shorter time our excess lasts, the better for everybody else on this planet.
I think also using the term guilt has a kind of a a Christian, well, we are a civilization that based, well, we are here based on Christianity, has a sort of original sin type of thing to it. And it reminds me of what George was saying to Michael Dow, George Tsakraklides, I can't find it hard to say his name, Tsakraklides, with Michael Dowd about the, we were doomed, we're a species that was at the beginning doomed and meant to destroy our environment and disappear and go extinct. And I think that's going to be one of the questions I'd like to ask him when we meet. I think it's on the 5th of June, next Sunday. At the same time, actually, it's going to be an early, not exactly the same time. I think it's 7 or 8. Check it on Reddit. But we're going to have 2 meetings next Sunday. In the morning with George, and in the evening we'll have the Western. So just letting you know. But yeah, that would be an interesting topic to go back on, this guilt thing, this original sin. Is the original sin the alien cortex? Don't know.
Well, yeah, that I've wondered about that a lot, and I've been trying to piece together because like I've had like really weird dreams and stuff, and I've been thinking about like when it all went wrong, like when it became inevitable, and I wonder if it was just like how Hugh wrote in the serious introduction, how the odds of skirting the alien cortex destroying everything was like a quantum fluctuation. Maybe at some point in primordial human history, the intellect, the demiurge, whatever you want to call it, the alien cortex won the power struggle against like the creativity and humanity and soul of our species, and then this technological monstrosity then became inevitable. But I don't know like when exactly, though. That's the problem. There's like no positive evidence, but you can kind of see it echoing through myths like Cain and Abel. In Norse mythology, Hugin and Munin, those two ravens. One is clearly the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain. Um, yeah, and then yeah, I don't know exactly when, but whenever that power struggle was resolved was when this became inevitable. And then as for guilt, I don't feel guilty because, they're like, I think we were doomed before I was even born with how inevitable all this stuff was. So, what I do is I've done my best to reduce intermediaries and excess in my life. And I never utter a word in defense of this system because I know who I'm loyal to.
Yeah, about dreams. I recently dreamt that me and my buddy, the same guy I went to the Soviet Union with in the 80s for a nature youth ecological festival in Murmansk. So I dreamt that he and we were in a enclosed room with in total 8 people with machine guns, and the others were our enemies. And I think mostly because the others shot each other or killed each other, he and I were the only ones to go alive out of that room, and because of that, and because we were the good guys in my head anyway, I didn't feel any guilt whatsoever because when you're in that situation, your task is to survive, basically, in a very basic way. But I remember the rest of the of the movie or the dream was that we survived this extreme violent event, and we went out into, I think, Norway, and we tried to sort of go around town and celebrate and have fun and in some kind of park or amusement park or and that kind of stuff, and tried to have a drink and stuff, and everybody was sort of looking at our bodies, which were full of holes from bullets and stuff. And so we were sort of oh, go away, you don't look right and stuff. So we were just trying to celebrate the fact that we were still alive, you know. So that's one of the pretty intense dreams I had for the past week. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and the one of the dreams I had that was really interesting. This was about a couple months ago when I was just really in the dumps, super depressed, crying a lot during the week. So it was having the question of like, what the heck is wrong with us? Again, I always come back to that question. And so in the dream, I woke up on the shore of the ocean, and the goddess Nyx rose out of the ocean, and I can't remember what I asked her, but she wanted to see my arm, so I extended it out to her, and she made a little cut with her claw on my arm, and golden light shone out, like a shaft of golden light shone out of my arm. And then on her same arm, she turned her arm over and blood was oozing out. So it was on my left arm. So on her left arm where that cut was on mine, blood was coming out. And I think what that means is just the gods are in all living things, is that like these crazy ideas of trying to build towers up to the sky or kill in the name of God. Like, I think it's all, this terrible death fantasy, because I feel like the kind of feeling of the dream is that like the gods are in all living things. They're in our bodies. It's not this immortal soul it's not these individual immortal souls that go to some sky father. It's one ocean soul that we all kind of emerge from. Yeah, and I think humans are the only creatures on the planet that have forgotten that. We have the ability to lie to ourselves. Um, like wolves, I was around wolves and volunteering at a sanctuary, and they have no delusions of what they are. Like, they don't deceive themselves. It's just that honesty that other animals have is refreshing. And then here we are living in the society of of lies, where we're just forced to be hypocrites. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Hey, to come back to something much more down to earth, because that's the way I am. I had an epiphany when I was studying biology. I was quite a young student, and then I discovered that our body that we have now is nothing to do with the body we had when we were younger, and because of the constant renewal of cells, the skin I have now, by the rate of turnover of cells from the base to the top that go away, etc., is not my skin. My bones are not my bones that I think are my bones when I was born with, or when I was a teenager, or when I was a young woman, because the bones are constantly destroyed and reconstructed with new cells constantly. And this goes for sorts of organs in your body. Yes, you say. So it's all, I had this sort of epiphany, because I suddenly think, what am I? And it sort of brought on an awful lot of cascades of things at a young age, where I started to reflect on what you're saying, and all this kind of fleeting assumptions about who we are and what we are. And also when I discovered the biome we live with inside our body, that's got billions and billions of creatures inside us, between bacteria and viruses and parasites and things that live on us and in us. And it was just such a wonderful epiphany. I can tell you, it just, the joy I got, and I don't know if that joy was not connected to the connectedness at the same time. It suddenly made a bridge, like you talk of that gold light and the golden and the blood. This is the divine, because the divine is in us, because it is, because that's what it is. And you observe. I mean, I'm more a science oriented person, so I see that through the discoveries of what I see in our body and around us and in the plants and everything. But I can totally understand where you are, TB.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like, all like dreams like that and insights like that, like words don't do them justice, but I think that gold light is just the general consciousness, not like my individual consciousness, but like all the consciousnesses of all living things on this planet and in the universe. And yeah, it's yeah, humans on this planet have forgotten that. Yeah, it's just sad. It's just it's just sad. It makes me cry.
Yeah, it's in my case, on our cottage, I was only 19 days old when I first went to our family cottage in the first Easter holiday of my life. And when I said that I had to be put in the hospital after going over to cow milk, my conversation with my mother the other day was that at that cottage in the mountains, the farm on the other side of the road was still, an active farm in those days. And my first epiphany, which I, kind of revisited 5 or 6 years ago when I went to the same place, was that this is the place where I had the big sort of we are part of nature epiphany when I was like from 0 to 1 or 2 years old. And that was where my parents would take me in to buy milk when we were in the mountain, basically. So when we were going there to buy cow milk from the farm, that was when I discovered the big sort of mountain forest behind the farm, and so I got this, wow, this is nature. I'm a part of this nature. I got it, before I could speak almost. I got this huge epiphany about the bigger mother. I had my mother and the bigger mother, which was sort of the nature mother, right? And at some point, it was that kind of cow milk, either from that farm or from the shops, that made my parents send me to the hospital where I had to be isolated for a week or something, and away from mother and everything. And just to think about that huge sort of transition from being with your parents who love you very much and your other big mother earth, which is just in front of you and you just discovered it and you just love it totally, and to be put into a concrete hospital, like the and my parents weren't even allowed to visit during that week because this was it was science and we had to be isolated to to isolate all the other possible factors to the problem and everything. So yeah, so it's a very big step from the green nature to the gray concrete hospital. Yeah.
Yeah, it's feeling the nature around you and feeling the nature in you harmonizing, and then getting cut off from that is, yeah, it's painful. It's sort of like being ripped out. It's sort of like ripping a plant out of the ground. Yeah. Yeah, when I was up in the wolf sanctuary, it's pretty close to like Idaho wilderness up in the mountains, so it was away from droning traffic and stuff. And yeah, when I didn't want to go back, but you have to pay rent, so um yeah, you come back to the city, it's all loud, it's disruptive. You get used to that peace, and it's like you never forget it. You never forget it.
Totally. And in relation to the Ted Kaczynski episode we had a week ago, my kind of salvation, when I was in my 20s, just like when he went into his cottage and stuff, was that point one, I had friends and I had a girlfriend, a live-in girlfriend. And point two was that we were in Oslo is very sort of wild, what do you call it? Outdoor wildlife kind of place. So it's a short way. You can take the subway actually into the forest and the mountains. So we were sort of pendling between the forest in the weekends and back to the city and university in the week. And when you were out and soaking wet on your in your boots and stuff, you kind of longed back to the city. And when you came back to the city on Sunday evening, you kind of hated being back in the city because, yeah. So it was kind of it kept us going because we loved to be dry on our feet on Monday, but we kind of hated it because we wanted to be back in the forest. But that sort of stopped us from moving into the isolated wilderness permanently, because going from A to B and back to A next weekend was sort of kind of ideal situation, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, this all kind of reminds me. So recently, YouTube algorithm threw the talk Gary had with you a long while ago, and re-listening to that, that was a gem. So like, part of it talked about like the aura, and then how the system and the controllers are studiously trying to prevent the Hyros Gamos, which is that expansive feeling of self beyond self. Because if that happens, then the control, the whole narrative of personal story control and institutions, if humanity has that experience, then I feel like the Eros will strike a blow, and that's what they don't want, because they're vampires. They feed off of death. They're death eaters.
Thanks for reminding me of that conversation of Gary and Hugh. I will put that on my list of things to
Well,
listen.
yeah, we should just put it on the sub because it's just so good.
The thing is that was very much inspired by the talk between Hugh and Michael that came a few days before, because they touched on a few things, and it kind of set me on fire, and that's why Hugh and I ended up having that conversation. But I just was thinking while you were talking earlier, DB, um, about your dream and the kind of also the missed connection with Mother Nature. um, and I think again, at a very fundamental level, I think we're still doing an alien cortex thing, which is inversion. Was one of the things that Hugh used to talk about, that the alien cortex was always engaged in. And I think even in a well-meaning discussion, trying to encourage people to consider their connection with nature and the Mother Earth and this kind of thing, we're proceeding from I don't know how to put it. We're proceeding from manifestation and materiality, and then looking back to the connection, where might be, I think in a way we're getting it in reverse, that we should be considering that the primary thing, if we feel or understand our connection to the primary thing, which is, you could probably just call consciousness, that what is shared universally is what the prime thing is consciousness, and everything springs from that, um, uh, and that may be a more productive way, a more beneficial way of looking at existence, rather than working from every separate thing, the connection between every separate thing, which is a large computation and is rather unwieldy, it's actually simpler to look at the one thing that everything uh, arises out of. I mean, in the traditional Hindu thing of everything uh, being Brahma's, the dream of Shiva or Brahma. That if we go back to the prima mater, which I think is one of the things that Hugh and I spoke about, that the sort of cosmic consciousness, if you like, or you could call it God if you want to, that to see our rootedness in that, and then once you've seen that, your connection with everything else comes automatically. It's not something that's a thought. It comes